Letter 22. A carpet of 70 million knots. Dear Lady Mary, how I would love to take an afternoon boat ride up the Bosphorus together with you for a picnic excursion. We could get out at one point along its banks, spread out a Turkish carpet to sit on, and enjoy tea, pastries, sweet watermelon, the view, and lively conversation. Actually, we really don't need a boat or the Bosphorus to create a setting of delight. Anywhere you spread out a Turkish carpet becomes a mini meadow of pleasure. In your letters, you provide us with many details concerning the daily life of the times, such as fashions, furniture, jewels, food, customs, dance, and music. This attention to detail has placed you as one of the leading recorders of the material culture of 18th century Turkish court life. Your sensitivity to fashion was particularly acute. You described the tunics worn by the Sultan on his way to the mosque, the harem chief's elaborate costume, the trappings of the retinue of guards, and, of course, all the gowns worn by the court ladies you visited. Although you are not what we would call today an ethnographer in the purest sense, you certainly did pave the way for them by realizing that no detail of daily life is too small to pass unwarranted. You looked carefully, you listened, you noted. Your eye to minute details illuminated a broader picture. You made fewer comments about architecture and the arts than you did about fashions. Perhaps because I am an artist myself, these are the things that I notice first whenever I walk down the street, enter a room, or travel. However, when you did provide details about art objects, your eye was as sharp as ever. Relating your dinner with Lady Hafisa, you described the napkins of thin gauze embroidered with gold flowers. It was with the utmost regret that I made use of these costly napkins, as finely wrought as the finest handkerchiefs that ever came out of this country. You went on to describe the china bowls with solid gold covers, gold knives with half set in diamonds, and a golden wash basin and embroidered towels. In one of your final letters, you described the Bosphorus yalas and their decoration of white pavements, roofs gilt, and walls covered with Japan china, wainscot of mother-of-pearl fastened with emeralds like nails, and the whole adorned with a profusion of marble, porcelain dishes of frit of all sorts, colored plaster, jars of flowers, windows sashed with the finest of crystalline glass, and the most exquisite painting of fruits and flowers. Architecture, too, is the subject of one of your most vivid letters, the one in which you describe your visit to the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, built for Sultan Selim II by the famous architect Sinan in 1569. You were right to say that this building is very well worth the curiosity of a traveler, as it is indeed considered Sinan's masterpiece. Dressed in Turkish clothes, in order to discreetly gain entry, you illustrate it in such detail that subsequent depictions by modern architectural historians are put to shame. Not one feature escapes your attention in this long letter, from the courtyard, the domes, the portico with its antique verdigris marble pillars, the high proportions made possible by the single dome, the marble balustrades, the Persian carpets, the great pulpit of carved wood gilt, the Sultan's private gallery for worship, the thick white candlesticks, and the 4 high towers, minarets, outside, which you had the curiosity to climb. Many today would agree with your opinion that it is the noblest building I ever saw. I especially enjoyed your delight at its decoration. The walls seemed to me inlaid with such very lively colors in small flowers. I could not imagine what stones had been made use of, but, going nearer, I saw they were crusted with Japan china, which has a very beautiful effect. I am charmed by the fact that you mistook the thick, raised glazes on Aznique tiles for stones, and am impressed that you could discern the Asian influence in them. Your portrayals of the Salimiyah and the Yala are so specific and vivid that I see them as clearly as if I were standing there myself, and are more evocative than any photograph. That said, the fact that you make little mention of carpets surprises me. Was it because Turkish carpets were already so familiar to you that you felt they needed no describing? The great hall carpets of the 16th century, those gigantic room-sized pieces woven in the court workshops of Sultan Suleiman I, Selim II, and Murat III, had long made their way to England to grace the finest manors of the land. Certainly there must have been one at your ancestral home of Thoresby Hall. Although those workshop carpets are magnificent, I confess that I prefer the smaller rugs, like the one we would take with us to sit on for our Bosphorus tea party. The carpets made by one pair of hands, those of a woman weaver, alone in front of her loom. Turks produce some of the finest carpets in the world, and rare is the visitor who returns from a trip to Turkey without one tucked in his suitcase. Yet for a Turk, a carpet is more than a pretty thing to put down on the floor. It is a piece of art. When we refer to art in the Western world, we think of the baskets of fruit, naked ladies, and landscapes that hang on the walls of museums, or the paintings which are fervently collected for millions on a raging art market. We think of snooty, highbrow art collectors, intellectuals of the aesthete, or artist pop stars like Picasso or Matisse. The average Westerner also carries with him the connotations of art as urban, religious, abstract, intellectual, male-dominated, upper class, and generally pertaining to the medium of oil on canvas. However, perceptions are different in Turkey. Turks have a concept of art meaning something done with a high level of craftsmanship and careful attention paid to detail. The emphasis on technical proficiency and discipline is as important as inspiration and intuition. Art is for every man, the common man, the villager, as well as the urban dweller. Turks are a practical people, so their arts are practical too. They work with the materials that surround them in their world. Walnut from the northern forests, marble from the quarries near Afyon, hand-spun wool from live sheep, vegetable and herb dyes, and solid clays. There is no room for frippery in the art objects of Turkey. Use is the ruling factor, and the object must be above all practical rather than merely decorative. Turks produce three-dimensional objects, articles made by hard-working hands with tools and needles, in front of fires and looms. Handicrafts form the basis of their art and include such media as calligraphy, mother-of-pearl, Ebru, marbled paper, weaving, leatherworking to form coats and saddles, oya, edging embroidery, felt-making, knitting, quilting, ceramics, coppersmithing, basket-making, and woodworking. Turks make houses of wood and rock filled with panels of tiles. They weave garments and home furnishings. They turn out glass beads to wear or decorate their animal trappings. And they carve wooden spoons to eat their delicious stews and soups. Decorative elements are chosen either from the natural world, most often their beloved flowers and birds, or from the more intellectual and mathematical symbolism of geometry. Turks have strong feelings about their country, their families, their faith, and their crafts. They believe that mastery and skill are the central components of art. They cherish the religious and historical importance of the decorative ornamentation they use. Turks also try to connect a sense of sacredness to their art by making it as beautiful and as perfect as humanly possible. For being skillful is praise to God. They are bold and frank in their work. Much like their food, their art is direct and no nonsense. formed by their heritage, religion, and regional cultures. A heritage so important that they are pleased to reproduce it over and over again. The objective of the Turkish artist is actually quite straightforward. The artist wishes to create a useful object of beauty, using the utmost level of skill, with a desire to execute an object that will reflect his love of God and his family, and that will be of service to his fellow man. It is as simple as that. Why did the Turks choose carpets? The French, food and fashion. The Americans, music. The Italians, cinema. And the British, gardens, in which to express their cultural identity. Who can say? But art is an expression of man's existence, and it unfolds differently to each culture. It is an expression of the material culture of the era in which it was created, a reflection of a specific time, place, and culture, as well as the vision of its creator. You can discover much about Turkey by looking at the objects they make. In those frustrating moments when I think I will never understand their spoken language, the language that is articulated to me by their artifacts, notably carpets, is completely comprehensible and brings me closer to these people. I admire their art, which combines a respect for tradition, at the same time it seeks to change and grow. The Turkish way of seamlessly combining the old and new in their daily lives has always made me feel comfortable when I am there. Roman ruins mix with Seljuk madrasas, and Byzantine walls and Ottoman fountains. Gardens and roses bloom alongside concrete walls. Highways hurl past ancient bridges and aqueducts. It is a mix where the bustle of streets belies the calm of the interiors of homes, and places of commerce and religious shrines lie cheek to jowl. There is room here for separate artistic voices to be heard and respected, just like you hear at prayer time, where the difference of a split second at the start of each muezzin's call and the variation of pitch in each song combine to create a different riff on the same line, echoing the varied cries of the gulls you hear chattering over the Amininu sky. This respect of the old and the new also applies to their handicrafts. Crafts comprise their art. The Beaux Arts school of sculpture and painting we know in the West have not traditionally played a major role in their artistic expression. They hold in great esteem people who turn wood, plait baskets, and knot wool. There is no separation between art and craft here, because craft is art. This confidence in their role as artists, in the full sense of the term, is one of the strongest pulls that Turkey exerts on me personally as a craft artist myself. The power struggle of art versus craft has raged in the West for the past 30 years, and is only now starting to subside. Art has traditionally been defined as objects conceived exclusively for aesthetic contemplation, whereas craft is considered an object primarily defined by its utilitarian function. Art historians and scholars have long debated these differences and have managed to find a comfortable ground. The many art museums dedicated to traditional arts founded in the West in the last 20 years attest to this. Yet traces of segregation remain. As a glass artist, I must use my hands to speak strongly and competently, and when I gaze upon an object made by a Turkish artist, I can feel his strong hands there too. That is why, perhaps, I was drawn to Turkey. It is a land full of competent craftsmen artists. Turkish artisans know that the excellence of art lies in the fusion of use and beauty. If an object is made with talent, skill, dedication, and love, it becomes art, period. When I make a glass vase or goblet, I have the chance to express creativity, hard work, and skill. The Turks think this way too. Their objects are wrought with intention and love, and that is what differentiates them from mass products. An eye balances it, and a hand touches it. It contains that spark of individual will and spirit, and yes, in some cases, a very distinct TT. Turks believe that art should accompany the everyday gestures of pouring water, toting vegetables, and stirring pots. In doing so, their art ennobles these acts of everyday daily life and fills them with dignity, beauty, and grace. In the end, object artists share the same quest as fine artists. We explore creativity. We invest ourselves in our art by developing our skills. We are curious. We push beyond the status quo to dare and to dream. We try to learn from our work. We believe that the process is more important than the product. And we try to understand the deep art within us and heed our internal third eye. I see the shadow of all of these quests when I look at a Turkish rug or a wooden spoon. In each eye-catching flower on an Iznik plate, I feel the love of nature and its colorful confusion that is shared by all Turks. With each upward stroke of calligraphy, I feel a heart lifting to Allah. In each knot, I see the face of a Turkish woman and feel her warmth and joy for life. Oh yes, those knots. Of all the Turkish arts, I am especially attracted to those colorful carpets. Like those golden stones I spoke to you about earlier, their knots speak to me as powerfully as words. As I said to you at the beginning of this letter, Lady Mary, I have a special affection for small village and nomadic rugs, the ones we would take with us to sit on along the Bosphorus for our picnic. I am not talking here about the great hall carpets of the 16th century, which are a totally different production than village rugs. Those were a male, court-sponsored production, highly influenced by the Persian aesthetic, with weavers working from elaborate cartoons drawn by court artists. No, I'm talking about what I call the magic carpets, rugs produced in small villages or by nomadic tribes. The majority of the finest examples that still survive were woven from 1850 to about 1925 using natural vegetable dyes. They still shine as vividly as the day they were woven, and their colors and patterns inspire the carpets being woven today. Then, and still today, all kinds of magic hands participated in their production. The hands of the men and women who raised and tended the sheep, sheared their coats, carded the wool, spindle drop spun it into fiber, collected the herbs to make the dyes, dyed the wool, made the looms, and knotted the carpets from visual and hand memory. These utilitarian rugs were made for religious, household, or agrarian use, or to tuck in dowry chests, or to sell at market. Villagers carried these rugs on their backs. They ate on them, and slept on and under them. They served as doors, carried salt and food, cradled babies, covered work animals, decorated tent walls, or even constituted in and of themselves the foldable walls of tent homes. Magic carpets can be knotted rugs or plain weave kaleems and embroideries, and they can take a wide range of forms according to their use. A rug is a living part of the Turkish home as much as the people who reside there. I find these rugs instantly appealing. I am not a carpetologist, and I do not look at them as an art historian. Rather, I look at them as an artist, and I react to these rugs on a purely visual and sensual level. When I encounter a rug, I am not down on the floor counting knots any more than I would analyze the pigment on the canvas when I look at a painting by Cézanne. These pieces of so-called mundane medium and ordinary patterns are often compelling work, surprising in their intent and symbolism, with their weavers creating pieces that are as beautiful, spiritually moving, and as intellectually nourishing as any so-called major artwork. I have been inspired by Turkish carpets to incorporate the same design principles I find so appealing in them into my glass art. These rugs are highly colored, with shade schemes that use pastels, primaries, and a blending of all the tones of the rainbow. Often, one hot, flashy color is chosen to stand out boldly. They are unapologetic, punchy, and spontaneous, and intrepid in design and color. They are not afraid to dare with symmetry-breaking patterns and chaotic colors to the point of insolence. Their power, color, and clarity can astound you. Yet, in other instances, they emanate a quiet peace from the delicate soft signature in the joining of their design and color elements. Their wool is dense but pliable, which gives these rugs a sculptural aspect. I somehow feel that they are alive, perhaps because in some way the wool in them always does remain alive. Alive, too, perhaps, because I can still smell the traces of nature in their mellow, natural dyes, made from the plants, minerals, and animal matter of the natural world around us. Village rugs sparkle, vibrate, and sing like the flowers, sunshine, birds, animals, stars, rainbows, and fields of green that you see depicted in them. These rugs are not shy about being imperfect. In fact, they often seek to incorporate a nodding TT to show that they remain humble. Those apparent little imperfections of craft are the small marks of humanity in the finished piece. All these unassuming rugs ask is to be loved just as they are. For all these reasons, and many other intangible ones, these rugs just make me plain happy and joyful. My fascination with carpets stems not only from an artistic viewpoint, but also because they speak to me as a woman. It is undeniable that I am drawn to these villages and nomadic rugs because they represent a woman's art. Rugs and textiles have always been predominantly the art of the feminine, blossoming far from the domination of a male viewpoint. Rugs are self-portraits of Turkish women. It is their personal statement with private meanings, yet at the same time, they are a very public announcement towards the world. They help the weaver feel connected to her surroundings, much like the letters you write to your friends, Lady Mary. She plays with knots, just as you and I play with ideas and words. A carpet is as individual as the woman who makes it. And when I look at one, I always think of the woman behind it. For each rug has a touch as individual as the hair of her child or the skin of her husband. Is she short or tall? How many children does she have? Does she love her husband, or does she argue with him? Is she pretty? What does her laughter sound like? Does she dream about the same things I do? What are her passions and her lusts? I try to guess her age by the level of her craftsmanship. Although they are unsigned and anonymous, they are very private and intimate windows onto her soul. I feel a bond with them, as I can read a part of myself in these rugs along with her. Her touch and her love are there, in the same way as she gives it to the arms of her husband, or to the children in her lap. I imagine I see redheads in the bright square carpets of the western part of Turkey, brown-haired women in the muted yellow central Anatolian prayer rugs, and dark-haired ladies in the dusky saddlebags of the east. I work in molten glass, a challenging and demanding material to master. For this reason, I can appreciate the same production challenges that confront the weaver, for knotting is a difficult art form as well. Sometimes I almost feel like I am sitting beside her at the loom. I can sense the varying strength and tension of her hand with each change of day in the squish and squash of her knots. I feel her frustrations when she got into trouble with her pattern not coming out right, or when she lost track of her touchstone imaginary red-focused dot 2/3 up the loom. I apprehend the same fear and hope that the piece will come out right in the end. For it takes courage to make beautiful objects, Lady Mary. I see in these carpets the expression of a woman's viewpoint of the world, and I find there the same components of my life as a modern Western woman: work, family, emotional life, society, and spirituality. These rugs have an inner life and story, released through the arrangement of color, the script of pattern, and other storytelling symbols of totemic and magic significance. I find the search for expression of the hidden female world quite courageous. I wish I could meet the women behind these rugs, because they possess qualities that I strive for in my life. They appear to be sharp, clever, skillful, generous, creative, patient, orderly, and industrious multitaskers. These are women I admire and would wish to have as friends. Turks believe that our destiny is written on our foreheads, that God determines our fate pre-eternally, and that our own will does not control the world. This, however, does not mean that there is no human free will. I believe that in these rugs, the weaver can exert freedom. She can determine how her hand, eye, and mind will come together to translate her spirit. She can choose her colors for a reason: the red of apples, her blood, her heat, the sunset, or the blue for the sky she sees when she is happy. She chooses her border to say something via its symbols. Did she end it abruptly to express a pain? She chooses the patterns she will repeat, either an age-old design or one she invents on the fly. We can only guess these motivations. Each woman's story, her hand, and her very heart are poured into these pieces. It is as if she is saying, "Today, on this loom, I am in control, and my decisions are mine, and mine alone. My children do not belong to me, nor does my husband, but these are my knots, and this rug is my chance to connect with every other woman, by tradition, by my heritage, and by my future. It allows me to express my inner self, my hopes and aspirations, my skill, and above all, my love." Those knots hold much more than twisted yarn for her. They hold her dreams as well as her reaction to life's joys, sorrows, and confusions. And the rug becomes an intense personal statement possible for all to see. I wish that it could be possible for all the women of the world to find such a creative outlet for self-expression. Beyond their artistic beauty and the female connection that bond me to these rugs, I admire most of all how they symbolize the vibrancy and distinctiveness of the geographical regions of Turkey. Turkey is a country with a varied landscape, which is translated into these rugs. There are olive groves and cotton fields in the stout square rugs of the Western Aegean, fields of yellow sunflowers in the prayer rugs of central Anatolia, and the wild power of mountainscapes in the Kurdish rugs of the East. I especially appreciate the sociological link between these kaleidoscopic carpets and the country and people of Turkey that I have come to know and love over the past 30 years. Rug weaving is as old as mankind, and the country of Turkey is comprised of rich layers of cultures going back 10,000 years. I see these rugs as an unbroken mirror of the astounding historical and cultural heritage that has formed this land and its people. I especially see in the mirror of these village rugs the reflection of so many of the qualities that I admire in the Turkish people: simplicity, directness, warmth, caring, industriousness, diligence, generosity, sincerity, concern for the societal well-being of their fellow man, and a conviction that life should be shared as a family in the smallest and largest sense of the term. Yes, Turkey is a colorful carpet of a country, knotted with 70 million souls. Sincerely, Catherine Branning.